Well, good morning. Good to see each of you here with us this morning. We are in Joshua chapter 14. If you would like to turn there. Last week we looked at Joshua chapter 13, and Joshua 13 covered, for the second or third time, the distribution of the tribal allotments east of the Jordan River. Transjordan, we would call that. Those went to Reuben and Gad and half of the tribe of Manasseh. And actually, those territories had been given to those tribes by Moses even before the Israelites crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land. They had asked for them from him and had received those territories. Moses, you might recall, actually got a little upset at that. And then God said, no, it's okay. Give them that land. And so as we have jumped in here, here's our outline of the book. As we have jumped into the actual official distribution of the land, the first group that's up is those 2.5 or 3. So that was chapter 13. And this morning, then, we get a continuation of that, and there's some really interesting stuff in this chapter. So let's jump in here. The first section here in 14, if I was writing this, I don't think it would be so many words. Because there's stuff you see in here that just kind of gets repeated, comes up again. And so the first section here, the first 5 verses of chapter 14, are kind of an introduction. I guess the author felt we needed one. Kind of a summary of this section that's coming up with the distribution of the land to the rest of the tribes. So Joshua chapter 14 and verse 1. Now these are the territories which the sons of Israel inherited in the land of Canaan. And then he tells us who distributes it. Which Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the heads of the households of the tribes of the sons of Israel apportioned to them for an inheritance. I bet you weren't expecting to see Eleazar the priest in there. Am I right? Why is Eleazar the priest involved in the distribution of the land? Any thoughts? It seems reasonable. Okay. Yeah, in a sense, represents God in this whole process. Who gets what, and how do you decide? Yeah. The Levites, the priests, they don't get a contiguous land mass for themselves. They will get a bunch of cities spread throughout all of the others. We'll see that toward the end of the book. This guy, by the way, was the son of Aaron, the guy that was a priest under Moses, and he's the father of Phinehas or Phinehas. Do you connect anything with Phinehas, Eleazar's son? He was actually the forebearer of the line that ended up with the high priest Eli in the days of Samuel. He's the one that stopped the plague when the Israelites, how do I put this in a G-rated? The Israelites were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing with foreign women. And he's the one that stepped into a tent and speared a couple through. And because of that event, he was willing to stand up for God. God gave him a continuous priestly line that ran all the way down to Eli. Okay, so he was the son of this guy, this Eleazar, interestingly enough. So another reason I thought of is that Eleazar probably has access to the record books, or the law, or whatever you want to call it, that Moses wrote, which had given directions on how this was to happen. And so that would be a good connection for him as well. Somebody has a question, and a number of those come up here. In fact, we'll see Caleb. God said, well, who remembers that from 40 years ago? But it was written in the record books, and Eleazar would have had access to that. If anybody had a question, you can go check that out with him. And we will see here too that an important part of the way that they distribute the land is by lot. We don't know much about that, but the priest probably had the official role there as the dice caster, or whatever they used for lots. Joshua is the next named one. Kind of obvious, he's the leader of the nation, the entire nation, so it makes sense that he would be in there. And then we have this reference to the heads of the households of the sons of Israel. And it's just almost a passing reference, and you would have no idea who they were or how many or any of that kind of thing. But interestingly enough, they're actually given names in Numbers when I can't talk this morning. When Moses told them how to do this. In Numbers 34, this is right at the end of the book of Numbers, right at the end of the life of Moses. Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "These are the names of the men who shall apportion the land to you for inheritance. Eleazar the priest," just read about him, "Joshua the son of Nun," yeah, "and you shall take one leader from every tribe to apportion the land for inheritance. These are the names of the men. The tribe of Judah, Caleb the son of Jephunneh." We know that name. The tribe of the sons of Simeon, Samuel the son of Ammihud. Don't know him. Of the tribe of Benjamin, Elidad the son of Kision. Of the tribe of the sons of Dan, a leader, Buki the son of Yagli. I'm starting to like my own name more and more. I'm glad I'm not Buki the son of Yagli. Of the sons of Joseph, and he has two tribes. Of the tribe of the sons of Manasseh, a leader, Haniel the son of Ephod. Of the sons of the tribe of Ephraim, a leader, Kemuel the son of Shiftan. Of the tribe of Zebulun, a leader, Elizaphan the son of Parnak. Of the tribe of the sons of Issachar, a leader, Paltiel the son of Azan. Of the tribe of the sons of Asher, a leader, Ahihud the son of Shalomi. And of the tribe of the sons of Naphtali, a leader, Pedahel the son of Ammihud. So Moses actually recorded the guys that are mentioned here just in passing. So this is not by accident. God actually told them, these are the guys who represent. And so, of course, you need a representative when the land is allotted so that they know what they get and who goes to who, and then he can take it on to the rest of the tribe and apportion stuff there. Yes, or pretty close. If you'll go with me that this happens at the end of Moses' life, we're looking at about 5 or 6 years between that time and this time. Right. It's not like a prophetic thing. You know, these guys haven't been born yet, but when they are, you're right. They were already leaders at that time and still are. Yeah. Verse 2, they were to apportion this by the lot of their inheritance, as the Lord commanded through Moses, for the 9 tribes and the half-tribe. Verse 3, for Moses had given the inheritance of the 2 tribes and the half-tribe beyond the Jordan, Reuben, Gad, half, and Manasseh. But he did not give an inheritance to the Levites among them. For the sons of Joseph were 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. And they did not give a portion to the Levites in the land, except cities to live in, with their pasture lands and for their livestock and for their property. Thus the sons of Israel did just as the Lord had commanded Moses, and they divided the land. Now that little phrase at the end there, they divided the land, that's going to take up most of the rest of the book. Just so you're prepared. Divided the land by lot is a fascinating question, and I'm going to give you a little bit of stuff here, but no solid 100% answers on what this means by lot. One of the ways that we know ancient peoples, we have found a few cubes that actually look a whole lot like dice, even from before this period. I'll show you one of those that apparently were used. Like today, you can use them for gaming. We do that all the time if you play Parcheesi or whatever. Does Parcheesi use dice? I think it does, yeah. Or for more significant things, I guess we sometimes use a coin to make a decision at a ball game, who goes first or whatever. You can see in this photo some knuckle bones from a sheep. There's the entire leg there, and then in the background there's a couple of knuckle bones. They would roll these and often mark them so you know what came up. Now with a knuckle bone, there's only 4 possibilities, not 6, like what you would get on a cube. And they would number them, if I recollect, they go 1, 3, 4, and 6 are the numbers that the ancient writers tell us that they were assigned. I've seen a few of these that actually have writing on them, scratched into them. This is let me get my pointer out here. This is an 8th century depiction of some kids in a palace, and the guys on this side are playing with these knuckle bones. They've got a couple that they've already rolled. They've each got one in their hand as well, probably just as a game. And these guys have little noisemakers. There's another name for those that you swing around and it makes noise. They're kids and they're playing, but it's a very early depiction of people using knuckle bones, and obviously in this way that they would roll them out and they would come up with a number. Sometimes the number was equated with a letter of the alphabet as well, and if you did multiples, the winner was the guy that got all the same number to come up on like 4 or 5 knuckle bones, or closest to that. The worst was if you had all different numbers. So that was at least one of their rules. This is a little later, 5th century BC. Some kids again playing with knuckle bones, and I realize it's a little, you can't see super close in, but that's what they've got in their hands that they're rolling to. From the 1st century, the time of Christ, this is a fresco at Pompeii, and these 2 kids are playing with knuckle bones. I can zoom in on that one for you, and you can actually see the little knuckle bone setting there. And another 2nd century AD, there you can see them quite clearly. This would be a Roman statue of a little girl that's rolling knuckle bones. It gives you an idea, though, of how many centuries this practice was employed. We've got evidence of it at least back to the 8th century, and so it wouldn't be surprising if something similar was used by Joshua. But the honest truth is we simply don't know. The text doesn't describe what these lots were like. We know this was a practice back in that day. And then here's the one I told you I would show you, which actually looks like a modern dice in 15th, 14th. So this is right about the time of Joshua. On the other hand, it could have been a different set of stones. Perhaps they used the Urim and the Thummim, a set of stones that the priest carried. What those looked like, we don't know. Were they 2-sided? Were they 6-sided? Something different. But at least I thought I could show you some stuff that was kind of similar, even if it's not what they used. It's just hard to tell. Any questions? Good. Okay. I think I can move on to the next section. So, the guys that grabbed land early in Transjordan have already been given it. So now it comes to the division of the land in the land of milk and honey. Who gets first dibs? Oh, there's a question. If it's something we really want, right away, dibs, right? Front seat or something even more important, that corner piece of cake. Well, of all things, it's Caleb. That's what the most of the rest of this chapter is about. Caleb. Why Caleb? I ask you that question on the back of your handout, and you can write anything in there that you want, but I'll tell you a few things about Caleb. The text describes him as a Kenizzite. A Kenizzite is a son of Kenaz. Kenaz was a son of Esau. Esau was the father of the Edomites, and Kenaz was one of the sub-families of the Edomites. Now, he's also identified here in our text as of the tribe of Judah. So I think it's safe to say that he's got heritage in both lines. He's got some Edomite blood. He's got some Judahite blood. Now, of course, that shouldn't really be surprising to us. I mean, what's a pure-blooded Israelite anyway? Well, there were 4 mothers that had the 12 boys that became the tribes. So right there you've got quite a bit of genetic variability. Oh, there's a dozen other examples we got. Moses himself had a Cushite wife, which really sounds like an African wife out of Cush, south of Egypt. So there's a lot more genetic mixture going on there than we sometimes think of. We just think, oh, the Israelites, well, they're a unique tribe. Well, Caleb's got some Edomite blood in him. Very, very interesting. You would recollect that he was one of the guys that was sent out to spy out the land, one of the 12 spies, and there were only 2, Caleb and Joshua, that came back and said, yeah, we should do this. They left from Kadesh Barnea, which is in the modern Sinai Peninsula. It's actually Egyptian territory at the moment. So if you want to go visit it, you have to go into Egypt to get here. It's an oasis, and the Israelites camped out there, and that's where they sent the spies out from. Their experience, that took them clear up into the north, and then they came back down toward the south, returned, and they apparently argued quite a bit along the way about what they saw and what they should do about it. 2 guys in the background here have the giant grape cluster carried on a pole, which the text describes. And it was only the 2 that said, Caleb and Joshua, that said, God's given us this land, we need to go get it. The rest of them had some really negative things to say. I'll wait on that for a second. Let me read the text here with you. Verse 6, the sons of Judah drew near to Joshua in Gilgal, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, said to him, you know the word which the Lord spoke to Moses, the man of God, concerning you and me in Kadesh Barnea. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought back word to him as it was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt with fear. But I followed the Lord my God fully. And in fact, that's what the text says earlier on, that Joshua followed the Lord fully. Verse 9, so Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land on which your foot has trodden shall be an inheritance to you and your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God fully. And now, behold, the Lord has let me live, just as he spoke, these 45 years from the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses, when Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, behold, I am 85 years old today. That's a rare and fascinating chronological note. So we know approximately, within a year, we know approximately when this was, and it would be 1400 BC, give or take a year. That also means that they have been fighting in the land for 5 years. Okay. God told him, I'll give you everywhere your foot has walked on the land. And he'll make a specific request here before too much longer. Sorry, forgive me here. I really enjoy pictures like this, not just because it illustrates somebody walking in their sandals in the 9th century BC, but also because there's still paint on this drawing. Somebody painted the sandals. A lot of it has disappeared. Presumably the entire thing would have been painted originally. And then I like seeing how they draw the little tassels hanging down on the robe and that kind of thing, and you just get a feel for how these people dressed. But what it's supposed to illustrate is feet walking, right? Across the land. He's 85 years old now, and he makes reference to both himself and his descendants. And so here's a 3-generational picture. I would imagine some of you have done 4 or perhaps even 5 generational pictures within your family. 5's kind of rare. It doesn't last very long. But Caleb is 85 years old now. He would have had children. He would have had grandchildren, and he may have had great-grandchildren in his tribe. Fascinating that he says there in verse 10, the Lord has let me live. You're aware that everybody else, Caleb and Joshua were the exceptions. Everybody else that was older than 20 had passed away during the wandering in the wilderness by God's fiat statement. This is what's going to happen. And so he was at least 20 years older than anybody else in the entire nation except for Joshua. So let me keep reading there. He said in verse 10, I'm 85 years old today. Verse 11, I am still as strong today as I was in the day Moses sent me. As my strength was then, so my strength is now, for war and for going out and coming in. Going out and coming in are also war-related descriptors. It's not one that we use today. Well, I suppose it would be deploy and return from deployment would be the closest thing we would have to going out and coming in, but it's a war type of statement. We think of an 85-year-old guy as being 1 foot in the grave. I don't mean offense to anybody, but even in our day and age, when lifespans are a lot longer than they were back then, 85 is a ripe old age. And he says, I'm as strong today as I was back then. And I don't think he's just flapping his gums. I believe him. I think God has preserved him in a supernatural way. You remember the sandals that didn't wear out for 40 years? I have the impression here that the same thing has happened with these couple of guys, Caleb and Joshua, that they are still in their prime. I don't quite know how else to put it. But that's a claim he makes, and nobody contradicts him. Um, compare him with what these other spies said. Nevertheless, these are the 10 spies who refused to go up. The people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Giants. Really big people, which they will go on to explain here in the next section. The men who had gone up to the land said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they're too strong for us." So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone in spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants." Oh, right? Scary. "And all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. There also we saw the Nephilim," and the author tells you that's the sons of Anak are part of the Nephilim, "and we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." Huge cities, giant people. We can't go up there. Of course, that's not what Caleb and Joshua said, but that's what they were fighting against. So now listen to Joshua in verse 12. "Now then, give me this hill country about which the Lord spoke on that day, for you heard on that day that Anakim were there, with great fortified cities. Perhaps the Lord will be with me, and I shall drive them out, as the Lord has spoken." So even there, he doesn't presume to speak for God, but God had told him, I'll drive them out before you. These references to Anakim and giant, well-fortified cities, that's exactly what the other spies were pointing out. And Caleb says that's the way it still is today. The Anakim are there. The cities are huge. But you know what? Give that to me. Apportion it to me. Maybe God will help me drive them out. Kind of understatement, isn't it? If he has the faith, you think God will come through and help him drive them out? Yes, and that's exactly what happens. Let me just show you a couple of pictures here. This is up at Shechem. I don't have a person in that wall. Beside that wall. That's a Middle Bronze fortification. This is the same wall at a different time of year. The stones are just gigantic that make up this wall. This is one of the cities that they probably saw as the spies as they worked their way up through there. This is a gate there at Shechem. There are steps here leading up to the city gate. Here's a lady sitting on the steps, and that gives you some perspective on the size of the massive stones that are around this double entry gateway. You can imagine the effect that had on these spies as they worked their way up through here and saw, those are there's no way we can take those. We don't have siege engines, catapults. There's no way we can get in there. Of course, that's a lack of faith. From the same time period, but down at Jerusalem, these are the remains of a tower that were built along the Gihon Spring, and you can see the guy standing against the concrete wall back there. That gives you some perspective on the size of the stones that were used to build this tower that has now, it's dilapidated, but just behemoth size stones that these folks, and it's not hard to imagine large guys doing this either. I have shown you before, nope, not this one. This is up at Yarmouth, which comes up a couple of times. You can see the guy standing up here, and again, just giant stones used in this gateway. This is actually early bronze, but may have still been used at this time. Down at Hebron, and this is the city that Caleb requested to be given. And again, you can see the guy standing there to give you some perspective on the massive stones that made up the city wall. And they would have been, the city walls would have been much taller than what you see here, of course. Okay. Great fortified cities. So you can see a little bit of that even today. I see that hand. Are there a lot of quarries? There are ancient quarries. Sometimes it's hard to tell because they would be quarried like during the Roman period, and then it's difficult to know, was it quarried halfway down during the Middle Bronze and then the rest of it, or, quarries are notoriously hard to date. Yes, there's a lot of rock in this area. You see a little bit of this. I often, like when I drive down, what's the road through the Flint Hills, like from Topeka to Wichita, the turnpike. Yeah, you see just outcroppings of rock, natural, and they're layers, and it's like, man, it would be fun just to own that property and build a house out of all that rock. And it's just laying there. You don't have to quarry it or anything. Maybe dig a little bit to get down to the amount you need. And that's true of this area too. There is just a lot of rock around. So it wouldn't even necessarily require quarrying. Just find a nice ledge along a hillside and start taking the pieces you need. And most of these are not worked. It's not like they cut them out of solid rock like the ancient Egyptians would do, or the later Greco-Roman people. These are rough fieldstone type things. Good question. Verse 13, so Joshua blessed him, and he gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, for an inheritance. Therefore, Hebron became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, until this day, because he followed the Lord God of Israel fully. Now the name of Hebron was formerly Kiriath Arba, for Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim. Kiriath means, like village or town of Arba. And then the land had rest from war. Okay, so that's kind of a summary end statement that's getting ahead of the rest of the book a little bit, but he's trying to kind of tie off this section. Let me give you just a couple of photos from the area of Hebron. Yeah, I gave away the answer in my note at the bottom. So I'll just, instead of asking you what you're seeing, I'll ask you, can you make out the vineyards there? It's beautiful grape country. And with grapes, you make jelly. Some of us really have to have grape jelly with our peanut butter. Yeah, they would have made wine, and in fact, the amount of wine that they could produce up here was more than they could use, and so it became a cash crop. They could export it, like to Egypt, where you can't grow grapes very well. There's a good market off to the south. So it's not just, hey, you can have all the grapes you want. It's also, you can make money off of this. There's a living to be made here. Today, of course, Hebron is part of the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority has control over it. Israel tries to leave them alone, and it's a very large city. In the center of that photo is the ancient tell. In fact, you can see that bit of wall along in here that I showed you a picture of earlier with the guy standing beside the massive stones. That's right there. So this is the area that he inherited or got as an allotment. Yeah, we do the same thing. I did. We know objectively it's a lack of faith. And we look at them, their view of God. They had seen what God did with the parting of the Red Sea? Really? That's pretty miraculous. That was a year ago, and now we got big fortified cities and big people. And guys, the reason God brought you out was for this, to give you this land. The human heart is sinful. Yeah. It's disappointing. It's not the way it should be. I do think we're in a very different situation in some ways. We're not Israelites. We're not looking for a land that God has promised to give us. But we have faith issues that are really similar. Whether or not we are willing to obey. I mean, God said, go take the land. They were unwilling to do that. Have faith, yeah. Viewing God as localized. That was very common in the pagan culture. And I mean, we see them worshiping the golden calf. Were they buying into some of that localized thing? Perhaps. Yeah, I mean that's not how they should have thought in worshiping the God who created the universe. But maybe they were thinking that way. Yeah. They would have had lots of folks around them that thought that way. The text here, if this was all we had, you would assume that the city of Hebron then belonged to Caleb. That's kind of the impression you get reading this. We have later texts, though. Joshua 21:12 is one of them, right within the book here. 1 Chronicles 6:56, that clarify that the city of Hebron itself was not given to Caleb, but the area around it. The city itself belonged to the tribe of Judah. So, just so you don't think that there's a contradiction between these various texts, I think those other two clarify what's going on here. It is interesting that in 1 Samuel 30, verse 14, we read about the Negev of Caleb. I'm going to go back to my map, which is on the front of your handout, and the little red area there is Hebron. And you can see off to the south, we have an area identified as the Negev, and apparently even in the days of David, there was a region known as the Negev of Caleb. And one other interesting one, when David is down in that area, he does some flock protection for a guy. Does a name come to mind? Nabal. Do you know what the last part of Nabal's name was? Nabal Bible trivia. Calebite. He is a Calebite. He is a descendant of Caleb, even though he was a fool and lost his life for it. So there's a couple of other much later connections to Caleb down in that area, which I thought was interesting. So it's not just an ephemeral, well, you can have the area and then you just kind of disappear, but it kept that name. Just a little postscript here. Caleb had a younger brother, and we'll read more about him later on, named Othniel, who took some related territory, Debir, which is just south of Hebron. Othniel also became the first judge. So if you flip over to the book of Judges, it's Othniel, the brother of Caleb, who was the first judge that delivered Israel. When Caleb wanted the city of Debir taken from the local inhabitants, he said, whoever goes up and takes it, I'll give him my daughter as a wife. And who took it? His brother. Genetics were a little less diluted back then. But okay, the times were different. So, let me get down to my points to ponder here. And I thought of more application points after I put this together. But Caleb was a Edomite/Judite, but more important than his pedigree was the fact that he followed God fully. That phrase that he followed God fully is mentioned in this chapter 3 times. And I think that's an important reason why he got first dibs on land. Because he followed God fully. And God said, that's my man, and I will give him what he wants. Now, he had to wait 40 years. We would get tired waiting, but he did. And his faith seems to have been as strong on that day as it had been 45 years earlier. He's like, okay, the time has passed. Give me that land. I'll go take those strong fortified cities. With God's help, I will defeat those sons of Anak. And sure enough, God helped him to do that. And the fact that he was Edomite, Judite, who cares? Rahab's another classic example. The fact that she's a Canaanite, who cares? She has faith in God. And God honored that and accepted her. Second point, the assignment of land to Caleb is a direct fulfillment of God's promise, demonstrating again God's faithfulness. Now that's the point of this entire book. God promised the land to his people, the descendants of Abraham, and here he is giving it to them. This is a much more specific promise and fulfillment, specifically to Caleb and his descendants. But again, the guy has faith and is willing to obey. God fulfills his promise. And I would challenge you to have that same attitude. Do what God says. It may not be the first thing that you want to do, but do it anyway. He honors that. And he'll fulfill the promises that he's made to us. And some of those for us are also long term. I'm really looking forward to enjoying eternal life. That's going to be great. I'm not experiencing it yet. It's a promise. And I have full faith and trust that God will bring it to pass. And I can point to things like this as evidence of his faithfulness. So I have no doubt he will bring it to pass, and I will enjoy that life with him. Just one example, I'm sure you can think of a dozen more. Questions, final comments? Katie? Uh-huh. How does this fit with the southern conquest when all of Israel went up against Hebron? In fact, wasn't it, if I remember right, it was Hebron that kind of instigated the rebellion with the Gibeonites going up to attack Gibeon that kicked off that whole southern campaign. I think this is afterward. It appears to me that the Israelites defeated a bunch of armies, like the armies of all these other cities down in there, or most of them, but they didn't actually then go and inhabit the cities, and there were people who remained squirreled away in the cities. So they had severely diminished their ability to fight, but they hadn't wiped them out yet. And apparently there are still sons of Anak living at Hebron. And some of them, the text will tell us, he kicks out, and they go down and live in the Philistine areas. So even he doesn't absolutely kill them all. But this I think is different in that it is Caleb and his tribe, whoever descends from him, his family, extended family, they're actually going up now to inhabit those areas. And part of that is wiping out, pushing out, or killing the people that are living there. That had partially been done ahead of time. The Israelites had killed everyone that they met, but that was different than actually removing everyone from each city. So, does that help? Yeah, I do think it is chronological here. Mm-hmm. Jerry? Uh-huh. How did it work with the Levites? We'll find out at the end of the book. There's actually a list of, I believe it's 48 cities that were assigned by lot to the Levites, and they're spread throughout the land. Random isn't probably quite the right word, but almost. So every other tribe got a land mass, a contiguous land with borders and all this kind of stuff, cities within it. The Levites just get individual cities with the pasture around them, and sometimes with little villages around them. So they're kind of spread throughout the land. Every tribe had to give some cities to the Levites. I think part of God's purpose there was that the Levites would be salt throughout every tribe, teaching, keeping an eye on the spiritual condition of the people. I think that was what God intended there. Leaders, spiritual leaders. I'm not sure that I think sin overtook a lot of that, but I think that was how it was supposed to work. So, good question. I'm overdue. Thanks for hanging with me, and let me pray, and we'll be out of here. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for the example that Caleb set. Help us to also fully follow you. Help us to be strong in our faith. We pray that you would give us the things that we need to bolster our faith, and sometimes I know that's difficulty. Help us, though, to respond to you in love and obedience and following you with a whole heart. In your name I pray. Amen.